And so as you continue to kind of unravel and examine some of these other stories that are unfolding around this particular property right now, unfortunately, that kind of pettiness is it just repeats itself over and over again. So the next little bit around this particular character and around this particular property is that, in this Disney Plus series that I was talking about earlier, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they've anointed a new Captain America, at least over the short term. And so this character is being played by an actor by the name of Russell Wyatt. And he's actually I wouldn't have realized this on my own if somebody else hadn't mentioned this, but it turns out that he's Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn's son. And right now he's playing John Walker, the new Captain America. And apparently he is being harassed by people who don't like that he has taken up this particular role. And so it's a lot of people are actually coming at him, and they're making these, they're making these accusations that, that his tenure with the character, that him becoming this character, it represents white supremacy. Okay. That particular accusation these days has become, quite frankly, so generic that it's utterly meaningless. He's a character that's been asked. He's an actor who's been asked to play a character over what's going to be, one way or the other, it's going to be a very short-term period of time. Nothing that the character has done in the show can be linked in any way, shape, or form to anything resembling white supremacy. So where are people getting this from? It just flat out doesn't make any sense. But hold on to your hats, because honestly, as much as I wish that we were done with that there, we're not. Because it only seems to get worse, and it seems to get more petty. There is something that is repeating itself quite often in relation to a lot of these to a lot of these properties, and maybe in relation to movies and films and TV shows in general. And that is that there are a lot of people out there who seem to come to these properties with the with the desire that they fail. And we have seen this over and over and over again. Quite often with a lot of things that deserve a better fate. There was Justice League, as I talked about. There were a lot of critics that came to that. They didn't ever want that thing to even get off the ground. But fortunately, it did. It turned out really well. The Joker movie, a couple of years ago, there were a lot of critics that were absolutely determined to make sure that that film failed. But the movie critics aren't the only people who are actually out there doing this kind of stuff. In a lot of cases, it turns out to be people who otherwise you would expect to be fans. People who otherwise you would have thought would be fans of these particular products, that seem to be determined to make them fail. And they've actually had as much success as anybody else has. The Solo, the Han Solo Star Wars movie from a couple of years ago, they actually succeeded in making that thing fail. The Birds of Prey movie in 2019, no, pardon me, I believe that movie was actually in 2020. But the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie, they succeeded in tanking that. There was also a little faction of these people who tried unsuccessfully to tank the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Fortunately, they weren't successful there. Even outside of video game, comic book movies, these sorts of things. I mean, the film Raya and the Last Dragon, I actually saw people out there were celebrating that this movie didn't do very well in the box office. Which, in my opinion, was actually a shame, because I have had occasion to see this movie. And it's a really good movie. It deserved a far better fate than what it's got. And there are people out there that are actually celebrating this. So as it relates to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, in episode 2, there's a scene. I'm going to try to divulge as little bit about this scene as I can so that I don't spoil the episode. But basically, there's a scene that involves police. Bucky and Sam, they're in this black neighborhood, and they've just been to they're having an argument. They're having an argument in the street, and these police pull up, and they just immediately assume that Sam is the one to blame. And so a lot of people have looked at this and they're saying it's like, oh, well, they're pandering to Black Lives Matter. And apparently there is some data that is rumored to exist that indicates that apparently these streaming services, they will track, they'll timestamp and track where somebody will quit watching a particular show. And there's a rumor that there's some data exists that a lot of people shut that show off right after the police showed up. No, I've seen that episode, and quite frankly, I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people are describing it to be. But of course, you have this segment of this particular audience, so to speak, and they're just sitting back and they're just shouting, okay, get woke, go broke. And now they're determined to tank the whole show because it doesn't reflect their personal, and I gotta be honest with you, very often extremely petty personal politics. And I would have to think that a rationally intelligent person would have to understand really what the stakes are in this and would not want to play these little games. Because what are these people who otherwise you would have thought would be fans? What are they doing with this? They're playing with fire. If you want to make sure that Disney and Warner Brothers, if you wanted to make sure that they stopped making these comic book movies altogether, deliberately tank out the movies, the TV shows, whatever they may be, deliberately target them to make sure that they fail. And that's a pretty damn good way to make sure that it will be a very long time before you see this kind of investment in those properties ever again. And obviously, this playing with fire, it does burn both ways. As much as a lot of these people that are deliberately trying to tank out all of these movies and TV series because it doesn't reflect, their more conservative politics goes, I think that you also have to take a moment to consider just how incredibly stupid it is for Ta-Nahisi Coates to be targeting a guy like Jordan Peterson, considering that, quite frankly, under his tenure, under Coates' tenure on Captain America, this has not been a book that sells very well. It sells very poorly. Even in just like the shipping numbers alone, let alone what is actually sold in the comic book stores. This is not a well-sold book. And so, instead, you're actually going to go out and you're going to take shots at somebody who does sell books? It seems to me that when your major monthly periodical is only moving 20,000 units out the door on a monthly basis, only a portion of which actually sell in stores, it seems to me like maybe you would want the people who are actually interested in buying books in general to buy those books instead of actually chasing them away. It seems to me that if Marvel was smart, they would be trying to attract a little bit more of that Jordan Peterson audience, not chase it away. And unfortunately, I do think that a lot of this has to do with just the editors at Marvel not really firmly understanding exactly where their bread is going to get buttered. Because quite frankly, the people that they're pandering to when they even hire people like Ta-Nahisi Coates, they don't seem to be comic book buyers. And the reason why we can tell that is because we can see that the books don't sell. I'll bet you that a Jordan Peterson written Captain America could probably outsell a Ta-Nahisi Coates written Captain America. I don't think that that's an experiment that the current editorial team at Marvel is going to rush to attempt, but what I will tell you this for absolute certain is that when Marvel Comics, arguably the biggest publisher in comic books, on a monthly basis with one of their biggest titles, is only doing 10 times, what my little short stories are doing on Twitter, you have a problem in that particular situation. You know, they should be doing 100 times what I'm doing. They should be doing 1,000 times what I'm doing. You know, Marvel Comics with all of that Disney money behind them compared to, compared to my little Twitter publishing house with $0 behind it. You guys have a problem. Maybe I should write Captain America. I think that, based on that, geez, maybe I should be writing Captain America. I can't guarantee you that the books would be as good as, say, Ed Brubaker's. But I'll tell you this much, I do have enough good sense to not be an asshole with the character. And Ta-Nahisi Coates does not have the good sense to not be an asshole with the character.